Aaron's ship touched down on a quiet planet far from the known trade routes. He had been traveling for many days, moving from one system to another, and his small craft needed fresh water and minerals to keep the engines stable. The planet had no sign of large cities or settlements, but his scanners showed rivers, forests, and valleys. That was enough reason for him to stop. When the doors of the ship opened, Aaron stepped outside and took a deep breath. The air was fresh, with a cool wind that smelled of wild grass. The sky was wide and filled with pale green clouds drifting slowly across. It felt peaceful, almost too peaceful, as if no one had walked here for many years. Aaron carried a small pack on his back with tools, water samples, and a scanner. He walked toward the nearest hill, hoping to find a stream. The ground was soft, covered with strange blue plants that bent as he stepped over them. Insects hummed in the air, and distant birds gave sharp cries. Aaron felt like an explorer from the old tales, setting foot on a world untouched by trade or war. For an hour he searched, and at last he found a narrow stream running down the side of a slope. He knelt, filled a sample tube, and checked the water with his scanner. The results showed it was clean, safe, and rich with minerals. He smiled with relief. He could refill his ship's tanks and be on his way. But then, something caught his attention. A sound. It was faint, but sharp enough to break the calm of the valley. At first, he thought it was only the wind moving through the trees. Yet when he stood still and listened carefully, he heard it again. It was not wind. It was a cry. Aaron's body stiffened. It was not the cry of an animal. It was the sound of a voice, weak and strained. Someone, or something, was calling out. He followed the sound up the slope and into a deeper part of the valley. The plants grew taller here, almost forming a wall of green. The cries became clearer, carrying a note of fear and pain. Aaron pushed through the thick growth until he entered a small clearing. There, in the center, he froze. A young alien girl was trapped inside a cage made of living vines. The vines had wrapped around her arms, legs, and waist, holding her tightly against the ground. She struggled weakly, her breath short, her voice a soft cry for help. Her skin was pale silver, and her large eyes shone with a faint glow, filled with both sadness and fear. Aaron felt his chest tighten. He had seen many strange things in his travels, but never something like this. The vines were not normal plants. They pulsed as if alive, twisting slowly every time she moved. They seemed to feed on her strength. He stepped closer, and the girl's eyes turned to him. For a moment, she froze as if unsure if he was real. Her lips moved, but no words came that he could understand. Yet her expression said everything. She was begging him to help. Aaron knelt near the edge of the cage. He touched one of the vines with the tip of his tool. At once, the vine twitched and wrapped tighter around the girl's wrist. She winced in pain. Aaron quickly pulled his hand back. "These things are alive," he whispered to himself. "Some kind of defense system." He studied the markings on the vines. They glowed faintly with a strange pattern, almost like writing. It seemed ancient, something designed long ago. This was not the work of nature alone. Someone had built this trap. The girl's breathing grew weaker. Aaron knew he could not stay here thinking too long. He had to act, and fast. He reached into his pack and took out a small torch powered by his ship's fuel. He lit it and brought the flame close to the vines, careful not to touch the girl. The heat made the vines tremble. Slowly, very slowly, the tight grip around her arm loosened. Aaron worked carefully, moving the torch from one vine to another. Each time, the living trap hissed and pulled back a little. Minutes passed, but at last the vines loosened enough for Aaron to slip his hands under the girl's shoulders. With one strong pull, he lifted her free of the cage and dragged her to the edge of the clearing. The vines snapped shut behind them, twisting angrily, but they no longer had her. The girl fell against him, too weak to stand. Her breathing was uneven, but she was alive. Aaron gave her a small flask of water, and though she did not understand his words, she accepted it and drank slowly. Her large eyes looked at him with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She touched his hand lightly, as if to ask why he had helped. Aaron simply nodded and smiled in return. For a long moment, they stayed there in silence, surrounded by the sounds of the forest. The strange cage of vines stood behind them, still shifting like a predator waiting for its next victim. Aaron knew this was no ordinary world. Something about this valley was wrong. But he also knew one thing for certain: this girl needed help, and he could not turn away. He looked at the distant mountains rising beyond the valley. Somewhere out there, he thought, must be the key to why she had been trapped. He tightened his pack, helped her stand, and whispered, "We'll figure this out." The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the valley with soft golden light. Aaron helped the alien girl sit near a fallen log where the ground was dry and flat. She was still weak from the vines, her body trembling from exhaustion. Aaron gave her more water, and she drank slowly, her large silver eyes never leaving his face. She tried to speak, but her words were unlike anything Aaron had heard before. The sounds were soft and melodic, almost like a song. He shook his head gently, showing he did not understand. For a moment, sadness crossed her face. But then she placed her hand over her chest and spoke one word clearly. "Lyra." Aaron repeated the name carefully. "Lyra." Her eyes brightened just a little, and she gave the smallest nod. Then she pointed at him, waiting. Aaron understood. He tapped his chest and said, "Aaron." Her lips moved silently as she tried to copy the name. It came out uneven, but it was close enough. Something like trust flickered between them in that moment. They could not speak the same language, but at least they knew each other's names. Aaron looked around the valley. The cage of vines they had escaped from stood in the clearing like a dark warning. The plants twisted slowly, as if searching for something else to trap. He felt uneasy staying so close. They needed to move, but Lyra was too weak to walk far. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small energy bar from his rations. He broke it in half and handed it to her. She sniffed it, unsure, then took a tiny bite. Her face softened with relief when she found it safe to eat. She finished it quickly, her strength returning a little. After resting, she tried again to speak. This time, she pointed toward the mountains in the distance. Her hand shook, but her eyes held meaning. She wanted to go there. Aaron followed her gaze. The mountains looked far, their peaks covered with mist. "Is that where your people are?" Aaron asked softly, though he knew she would not understand his words. Still, the tone of his voice made her nod. She then pressed her hand against the ground, tracing lines in the dirt. She drew a simple picture of a figure standing tall, then another figure smaller beside it. She pointed to herself and then to the larger figure. Aaron studied the drawing and thought carefully. She was trying to tell him about someone important, maybe her family. The more she tried to explain, the more Aaron realized how frustrated she felt. Every time she made a gesture, she paused, searching for the right way to show her thoughts. At last she gave up and lowered her head, her silver hair falling over her face. Aaron sat beside her quietly. He could see she was afraid not just of the vines but of being misunderstood. She was alone, separated from her people, and trapped in a valley that wanted to consume her. Aaron could not imagine how long she had been there, calling out for help. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that carried comfort even when words were not understood. Lyra looked up at him slowly. Her eyes shone with tired hope. For the next hour, Aaron worked to make simple gestures they both could follow. He touched his chest and said, "Aaron." She copied. Then she touched her chest and said, "Lyra." He copied. They repeated this with other objects: water, food, fire. Lyra's smile grew a little with each success. It was the beginning of a shared language, built from patience. As night fell, Aaron gathered dry branches and lit a small fire with his torch. The flames burned steady, keeping the cool night air away. Strange cries echoed in the distance, but the fire kept smaller creatures from coming too close. Lyra sat close to the warmth, her eyes fixed on the fire as if it carried memories of home. Aaron watched her quietly. She seemed young but carried an air of something deeper, something ancient. Her silver skin reflected the firelight in soft waves, and her movements were delicate, almost careful, as if every gesture carried meaning. When the fire burned lower, she began to hum softly. It was not speech but a melody, slow and gentle. The sound was unlike anything Aaron had ever heard, filled with sadness yet also with strength. He listened, letting the music flow through the night. He realized the hum was her way of speaking when words could not reach him. It was her silent plea, asking to be understood, asking not to be left alone. Aaron closed his eyes and listened until the sound faded. When he opened them again, he saw her staring at him with quiet hope. He gave a small nod, as if to say he had heard her heart even if he did not know her language. Lyra then pointed once more to the mountains. Her hand trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. Aaron knew what she was asking. She wanted him to take her there, to help her find her people, to escape the valley that had turned against her. Aaron looked at the long path ahead, the thick forests, the rivers, the unknown dangers. It would not be easy, but he could not refuse. Something deep inside told him this meeting was not by chance. He was here for a reason. He smiled faintly and nodded. "We'll go," he said. She may not have understood the words, but she understood the gesture. For the first time since he had found her, a true smile spread across her face. It was small, fragile, but it carried light into the darkness of the valley. The night passed slowly. Aaron kept watch while Lyra rested near the fire. He studied the sky filled with green clouds and strange stars, thinking about the journey to come. He did not know what lay ahead in the mountains, but he knew one thing clearly. He had given his promise, even if only through a nod and a smile. And he would keep it. Because in her silent plea, Aaron had heard something more than fear. He had heard trust. The morning sun rose slowly above the valley, spreading soft light across the misty ground. Aaron stirred from his light sleep and added more branches to the fire. Lyra was already awake, sitting quietly near the stream, her hands resting on her knees. She looked weak but more alert than before. Aaron walked over with his pack. "We should move," he said, though he knew she did not understand the words. He pointed toward the mountains in the distance, and she nodded slowly. Her eyes showed determination, even though her body was still weak from the night before. As they began walking, Aaron kept close to her side. The forest around them was dense, the trees tall and covered with hanging vines. The ground was uneven, with roots curling across the soil like snakes. Strange birds called from the branches, and the air carried a sweet but heavy scent from blooming flowers. Lyra moved carefully, often pausing to listen. Aaron noticed how her ears twitched slightly at every sound. She was alert to things he could not sense. When she raised her hand and stopped, he followed her lead. Once, she pulled him back just before he stepped into a patch of ground that looked normal but sank when touched. A hidden pit, covered by plants. Aaron realized she knew the dangers of this place. She might not have strength yet, but her knowledge was guiding them. They walked for hours, resting only when Lyra's body trembled too much to continue. During one of these pauses, Aaron noticed her arm. The skin where the vines had wrapped was marked with faint glowing lines. They pulsed softly, like veins of light under her skin. He frowned. The vines left something behind. She noticed his stare and pulled her arm close, as if ashamed. Then she slowly opened her hand and showed him. The glow spread faintly across her palm before fading. Aaron could see it pained her, though she tried to hide it. He knelt beside her and took out a scanner from his pack. The small screen showed strange energy signals coming from her arm. The vines had not only trapped her, they had planted something inside her. "This is more serious than I thought," he muttered. Lyra tilted her head, not understanding, but she seemed to guess the truth. She touched her chest and then pointed to the mountains again. Her meaning was clear. If they reached the mountains, maybe there was a way to remove what the vines had done to her. Aaron gave a firm nod. "Then we'll get you there." They continued onward. As the sun climbed high, the heat grew stronger. Sweat ran down Aaron's neck, and Lyra's steps grew slower. He offered her water often, making sure she did not collapse. Yet every time she stumbled, she forced herself back up. Aaron admired her spirit. She was not giving up. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing where the trees thinned. But the moment they stepped into it, the ground shifted. Thick vines burst from the soil, rising like snakes. They whipped through the air, reaching for Lyra. Aaron reacted quickly. He pulled her back, his torch already in his hand. Flames roared as he aimed at the vines. They recoiled at the heat, but not for long. More vines shot up, surrounding them in a circle. Lyra's breathing quickened. She gripped his arm tightly, fear flashing in her eyes. Aaron tightened his jaw. "Not again," he said. He moved the torch in wide arcs, keeping the vines back. The flames hissed as they touched the plants, burning small sections, but new vines grew quickly to replace them. Aaron realized this was no ordinary attack. The valley itself was trying to pull her back. He thought fast. Fire could not destroy them all. He needed another way. He remembered the scanner and pulled it from his belt. The readings showed a strange frequency in the vines, the same as the glow in Lyra's arm. The connection was clear. The vines were drawn to her, bound to her somehow. He turned to her. "They're after you. We need to break this link." Though she did not understand the words, she seemed to sense his thought. She lifted her glowing arm, wincing in pain as the lines brightened. The vines reacted instantly, surging closer. Aaron raised the torch again, holding them back, but it was not enough. Then Lyra did something unexpected. She pressed her hand to the ground, forcing the glow through her skin. The earth trembled. The vines hesitated, shivering as if confused. Aaron stared in surprise. She was fighting them with the same power they had given her. But the effort drained her quickly. Her body shook, her face pale. Aaron knew she could not hold out long. He rushed forward and grabbed her hand. The glow spread into his palm for a moment, making his skin burn slightly, but he held on. "Come on," he urged. "We do this together." The vines writhed, striking from every side. Aaron swung the torch with one hand and held her glowing hand with the other. He pushed his own strength into the effort, focusing all his will on keeping her steady. For a long moment, the battle hung in silence. Then, with a sharp crack, the vines collapsed. They fell limp to the ground, curling into ash-like threads that faded into the soil. The clearing grew still. Aaron dropped the torch, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Lyra sagged against him, nearly fainting from exhaustion. But the glow in her arm dimmed until it was only a faint trace. The link had been broken. He looked down at her. "You did it?" She gave him a weak smile, her voice a whisper. "Together." Though the word was imperfect, the meaning was clear. Aaron felt a spark of pride and warmth. He carried her to the edge of the clearing and set her down under the shade of a tall tree. He gave her water, and she drank slowly. Her strength was returning little by little, though she was still pale. As evening came, Aaron built another small fire. He sat beside her, watching the flames. The danger of the vines was real, but they had found a way to fight back. Together, they were stronger. Lyra leaned against him lightly, her eyes half closed. For the first time, she seemed to rest without fear. Aaron looked at the mountains again, their peaks glowing in the sunset. The path was long, the dangers unknown, but he knew they had taken an important step. The chains that bound her were not unbreakable. And as long as they faced them together, there was hope. The forest grew quieter as night settled over the valley. The fire Aaron had built glowed softly, its light flickering on the trees around them. Lyra sat close to the flames, her silver skin reflecting the orange glow. She held her knees close to her chest, resting her head gently as her eyes grew heavy with sleep. Aaron kept watch, sitting nearby with his scanner in hand. He checked the signals again. The strange glow in Lyra's arm had weakened after they fought off the vines. It was still there, but it no longer pulled the plants toward her. That gave him some relief, though he remained cautious. He looked at her. She had been through so much, yet she still carried herself with quiet strength. Even in her silence, he could sense her determination. Aaron wondered what her life had been like before the valley trapped her. What had she lost? Who was she trying to reach in the mountains? The fire cracked softly, and she stirred, opening her eyes. For a moment she seemed startled, but when she saw Aaron sitting nearby, her body relaxed. She gave a small nod, as if to say thank you for keeping watch. Aaron smiled faintly in return. When morning came, they set out again. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wet leaves. Birds flew above, their wings flashing with colors Aaron had never seen. Lyra walked more steadily now. She still grew tired quickly, but her steps were firmer, guided by purpose. As they walked, Aaron tried to teach her more words. He pointed to the sky and said, "Sky." She repeated, the sound uneven but close. He pointed to the trees. "Tree." Again, she copied. Each time she spoke, her voice carried a soft, musical tone. She seemed to enjoy learning, and her smile appeared more often. At one point, She picked up a smooth stone and held it out. "Stone," she said. Aaron laughed gently, surprised she remembered. He nodded. "Stone." She beamed, proud of her progress. Though their language was still limited, they were building something stronger than words. Aaron noticed how quickly she read his expressions, how she seemed to understand his meaning even when he said nothing. Trust was forming between them, quiet but steady. By midday, they reached a ridge that overlooked part of the valley. From there, the mountains seemed closer, though still far away. Mist covered their peaks, giving them a mysterious glow. Lyra pointed eagerly, her eyes shining with hope. Aaron placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get there." Their path down the ridge, however, was dangerous. Loose rocks slid under their feet, and sharp cliffs lined the trail. Aaron moved first, testing each step, then guided Lyra carefully behind him. More than once, she slipped, but Aaron caught her before she could fall. She clung to his arm tightly, her trust clear in the way she leaned on him without fear. When they reached the bottom safely, she looked at him with gratitude. "Aaron," she said softly, her voice almost carrying warmth. He nodded, understanding her meaning without needing more words. Later, as they rested near a stream, Lyra tried to show him something. She drew patterns in the sand with a stick, shapes that looked like stars and circles. Aaron realized she was teaching him about her people. She pointed at the largest circle, then at herself, then placed her hand over her heart. "You're from there?" Aaron asked. She nodded firmly. Then she pointed to a smaller circle near the first one, then to the mountains. Aaron studied it, realizing she was saying the mountains held something connected to her home world. Perhaps a temple, or a place of memory. The more she tried to explain, the more he saw the weight she carried. She was not only trying to reach her people, she was protecting something greater, something important. Aaron felt a new respect for her. She was more than just someone needing rescue. She was carrying a legacy. As evening approached, they found shelter under a large rock formation. The wind grew stronger, whistling through the cracks of the valley. Aaron set up a small campfire, while Lyra sat beside him, watching the flames. After a while, she reached into the cloth around her waist and pulled out a small crystal. It glowed faintly with a soft blue light. She held it carefully in her hands, almost with reverence. Aaron looked at it curiously. "What is that?" he asked, though he knew she would not understand. She lifted the crystal toward the fire, letting the light shine. Then she pointed to the mountains again and placed the crystal over her heart. Aaron understood enough. It was something sacred, something tied to her people, and it was the reason she had to reach the mountains. She handed it to him for a moment. Aaron hesitated but took it gently. The crystal was warm, and as he held it, he felt a strange calm flow through him. It was as if the stone carried memories, whispers of voices from long ago. He returned it to her with respect, and she nodded, pleased that he had understood its importance. That night, as the fire burned low, Lyra rested with the crystal close to her chest. Aaron sat awake, listening to the distant sounds of the forest. He thought about all that had happened since he landed on this planet. He had only come for water and minerals, yet here he was, walking beside an alien girl who trusted him with her life. It was not duty or chance that kept him by her side. It was something deeper. She had looked at him with fear at first, but now she looked at him with trust. And that trust had become a bond, unspoken but strong. Aaron felt a quiet determination. He would not leave her. No matter what dangers the valley still held, he would help her reach the mountains. He did not fully understand why, but he knew it was the right thing to do. When dawn came again, they rose together and continued on. Each step brought them closer to the mountains, closer to answers, closer to the truth of why the valley had turned against her. But more than that, each step deepened the bond of trust that had begun with a single rescued moment. The path toward the mountains grew more difficult with each passing day. The trees grew taller and closer together, their branches weaving into a ceiling that allowed only a little sunlight to slip through. The air was damp, filled with the sound of dripping water and the rustle of unseen creatures moving among the leaves. Aaron led the way, cutting through thick undergrowth with a small blade. Lyra followed close behind, her silver eyes scanning the shadows. She no longer looked as fragile as when he first found her. Though she was still thin and often tired, her steps carried purpose. They stopped at a small clearing to rest. Aaron set down his pack, while Lyra knelt beside a pool of water fed by a thin stream. She dipped her hands in and let the cool water flow across her face. For a moment, she looked peaceful. Aaron sat across from her, watching. "You're stronger now," he said softly. She did not understand his words, but she noticed the way he smiled, and she gave a small nod in return. After a few minutes, Lyra reached into her cloth again and pulled out the glowing crystal she had shown him before. She held it in her hands and placed it gently on the ground between them. Then she began drawing in the dirt with her finger. Aaron leaned forward. She drew a circle, larger than her hand, then added smaller circles around it. He realized it was a map of stars. She pointed to the largest circle, then tapped the crystal. Her lips formed a soft sound, perhaps the name of her home world. She continued drawing, making a path that led to a small mountain shape. She pointed to the mountains ahead of them, then placed the crystal in the drawing. Aaron studied it closely. She was telling him the crystal was connected to the mountains. But then she drew another shape, a vine twisting around the star map. Her expression darkened. She placed her glowing arm beside the drawing, showing the faint lines that still ran under her skin. Aaron understood. The valley's traps were not only hunting her, they were tied to the legacy of her people. Lyra's eyes filled with sadness as she continued. She drew many small figures, then slowly wiped them away with her hand until only one figure remained. She touched her chest. Aaron felt a heavy weight settle in his heart. She was telling him she was the last of her kind here. Her people had been taken by the valley or scattered beyond reach. The crystal she carried was not just important, it might be the last piece of her people's memory. He sat in silence for a long moment. The truth struck him deeply. This journey was not simply about helping her escape danger. It was about protecting a story that would otherwise be lost forever. Finally, he spoke gently. "You're not alone anymore." Lyra tilted her head, not knowing the words, but the softness in his voice reached her. She gave a small, tired smile. That evening, they continued walking until they reached the edge of an ancient structure hidden beneath the trees. It looked like the remains of a stone wall, half covered in moss and vines. The stones were large and carefully shaped, proof that this place had once been built with skill. Lyra's eyes widened. She rushed forward, touching the stone with her hands. Her lips moved quickly, speaking words Aaron could not understand. Her voice carried both joy and sorrow. Aaron walked closer, running his hand over the carvings on the wall. Symbols were etched deep into the stone, glowing faintly in the dim light. They matched the patterns he had seen on the vines and on Lyra's arm. "This was your people's city," Aaron said quietly. Lyra nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She pressed her forehead against the stone, as if greeting an old friend. Aaron set down his pack and scanned the structure. His device picked up strong energy readings from beneath the ground. Whatever powered this place was still alive, hidden under centuries of growth. They decided to rest there for the night. Lyra sat close to the wall, humming softly, her voice carrying a melody that echoed through the ruins. Aaron listened in silence, feeling the weight of history pressing down on them both. When morning came, they explored further. Behind the broken wall was a path of cracked stone leading deeper into the forest. At the end of the path stood the remains of a tall tower, half collapsed but still holding shape. Inside, they found more carvings. These were clearer, showing images of tall figures with silver skin, like Lyra. They stood in rows, holding crystals in their hands, their faces calm and proud. Lyra traced the carvings with her fingers, whispering softly. She then pointed to herself and the crystal she carried. Aaron understood. She was the daughter of their last leader, chosen to carry the memory of her people. The hidden truth became clear to him. The valley's traps had not been created to harm her people at first. They had been built long ago as protection against outsiders. But something had gone wrong. The system had turned against its own creators, trapping even the ones it was meant to protect. Aaron looked at Lyra. She was not only trying to survive. She was carrying the burden of restoring what was broken. As the day ended, Aaron built another fire in the ruins. Lyra sat beside him, holding the crystal tightly. She looked at him, her eyes full of both fear and determination. She spoke his name softly. Aaron. He met her gaze and nodded firmly. I'll help you finish this. She might not have understood every word, but she understood his promise. That night, as the stars appeared above the broken tower, Aaron thought about the journey ahead. The mountains were still far, and the dangers of the valley would not stop chasing them. But the truth he had learned gave him new strength. This was no longer only her fight. It was theirs. Together, they would uncover the hidden truth fully, and together they would set it right. The ruins behind them glowed faintly as dawn broke. Aaron and Lyra left the broken tower with quiet steps, their path now clear. The mountains stood closer than ever, their peaks hidden in swirling mist. The air grew colder with each mile, and the trees grew taller, their branches heavy with hanging moss. Aaron carried most of the supplies, while Lyra walked beside him with the crystal held close to her chest. She was stronger than before, though the faint glow on her arm still appeared when she was tired. He watched her carefully, always ready to steady her if she stumbled. The ground soon grew rougher, covered with stones and tangled roots. They crossed a narrow river by stepping on slick rocks, and twice Aaron had to pull Lyra forward to stop her from falling into the rushing water. Each time she laughed softly, a rare sound that made the difficult journey feel lighter. They pressed on through thick undergrowth. Strange creatures with glowing eyes watched them from the shadows but did not attack. Lyra hummed a low tune, and Aaron noticed the animals pulled back whenever they heard her voice. He realized she was calming them, perhaps using the same energy that connected her to the crystal. By midday, they reached a wide ravine cutting through the land. A broken stone bridge stretched across it, half fallen but still holding. Aaron studied it with doubt. The drop below was deep, filled with jagged rocks and mist. Lyra stepped forward bravely, placing her foot on the old stone. It shook but held. She looked back at Aaron and nodded. Careful, Aaron warned, though he knew she could not understand. They crossed slowly, one step at a time. Dust crumbled beneath their feet, and small pieces of stone broke away, falling into the ravine. At one point, the path narrowed to only a single slab. Lyra wavered, her arms spreading for balance. Aaron quickly reached out and caught her hand. Together they made it across, hearts racing. On the other side, they rested under a tree. Lyra let out a long breath, her eyes shining with relief. She squeezed Aaron's hand gently before letting go, a silent way of saying thank you. The climb grew steeper as they approached the lower slopes of the mountains. Thick fog rolled down from the peaks, making the path unclear. Aaron pulled out his scanner, but the device struggled against the strange energy of the valley. Lyra, however, seemed to know the way. She followed faint carvings etched into the rocks, guiding them forward. As the afternoon passed, the weather grew colder. Their breath came out in pale clouds, and the air smelled of stone and frost. Aaron gave Lyra his outer coat, and though it hung loosely on her small frame, she accepted it with a grateful smile. By evening, they found a cave in the side of a cliff. Inside, the air was warmer, and the ground was smooth. Aaron lit a fire while Lyra explored the walls. She found old symbols carved into the stone, glowing faintly when she touched them. She traced them with her fingers, her expression soft and distant, as if remembering something from long ago. Aaron watched her. "This place was important to your people, wasn't it?" She turned, her eyes reflecting the firelight, and gave a slow nod. Then she held up the crystal. When she placed it against the carvings, the symbols lit brighter, filling the cave with a soft blue light. Aaron was amazed. The walls showed images of travelers climbing the mountains, carrying crystals like hers. At the top, they reached a great stone circle, where beams of light joined together. Lyra pointed to the picture, then to herself. She was telling him the crystal had to be taken to the mountain's heart. That night, as the cave glowed gently around them, Aaron and Lyra shared quiet moments. He taught her more words: fire, stone, friend. She repeated them carefully, sometimes laughing when she mispronounced one. Aaron found himself laughing too, the sound echoing in the cave like a promise of hope. When dawn returned, they left the cave and began the hardest part of their journey, the true climb. The slopes were steep, covered in snow and sharp rocks. The wind howled, pulling at their clothes and hair. Aaron helped Lyra climb, often lifting her over large rocks or steadying her on icy patches. More than once, he wanted to suggest turning back, but when he looked at her determined eyes, he kept going. She was not afraid. She carried the crystal with both hands, holding it close as if it guided her. Hours passed, and the climb tested their strength. Aaron's arms ached, his breath grew short, but he did not stop. At last, they reached a high ledge where the clouds broke for a moment. From there, they could see the entire valley stretching below. The forests, rivers, and ruins spread like a painted map. Lyra stood beside him, her silver hair whipping in the wind. She raised the crystal, and it glowed brightly, answering the call of the mountains. Her face lit with hope, and she whispered a soft word that Aaron could not understand but felt deep in his heart. The journey was not over. The mountain's peak still rose above them, hidden in mist. But they had come far, farther than Aaron had ever imagined when he first landed on this world. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with red and gold, Aaron looked at Lyra. She met his eyes and gave a small smile. Together they had crossed rivers, faced living vines, and survived the valley's traps. Together they had built trust where there had once been fear. Now, together, they would finish the journey. Aaron turned to the path ahead, his resolve firm. The mountain awaited, and with it the freedom Lyra had sought for so long. The wind at the mountain's peak was sharp and cold, whipping around Aaron and Lyra as they took their final steps. Snow crunched under their feet, and the clouds swirled thickly around them. Despite the chill, Lyra held the crystal close to her chest, its soft glow brightening with every step toward the summit. Aaron steadied her, placing a hand on her back. "Almost there," he said, though she did not understand the words. She only nodded, eyes fixed on the glowing tip of the peak that emerged from the mist. The climb had been the hardest part of their journey. Slopes were steep, jagged rocks blocked the path, and icy wind tried to push them back. But together they had overcome every obstacle. Each step strengthened the bond between them. They moved in silence, understanding each other without words, trusting completely. Finally, they reached a flat plateau at the summit. The view was breathtaking. Below them, the valley stretched endlessly, the forests and rivers a beautiful mosaic. Above them, the clouds parted slightly, letting the first rays of sunlight touch the snow. Lyra looked around, awe shining in her silver eyes. In the center of the plateau stood a circular stone structure, ancient and glowing faintly. Aaron approached it carefully. The carvings on the stones matched the images they had seen in the ruins below. It was clear this was a sacred place, a heart of the mountain, where Lyra's people had once gathered. Lyra stepped forward, holding the crystal high. She placed it in the center of the stone circle. The moment it touched the surface, beams of soft blue light shot upward, meeting the sunlight streaming through the clouds. The entire plateau glowed, and the air filled with a quiet hum, like the mountain itself was alive. Aaron watched in amazement. He could feel the power and history of the place, a connection to the people who had come here long ago. Lyra's glow intensified as the crystal merged with the stone circle. She looked at Aaron, her eyes full of gratitude and relief. He smiled, understanding without words that they had reached their goal. The journey had not just been about survival. It had been about restoring hope and memory to a people almost forgotten. As the light from the crystal spread across the plateau, small figures began to appear around them. They were faint at first, like shimmering shadows, but as Lyra focused, their forms became clearer. These were the spirits of her ancestors, the ones who had built this place. They surrounded her, nodding in recognition, their faces calm and proud. Lyra's shoulders relaxed, and she lowered the crystal. The glow faded, but the warmth in her heart remained. She had fulfilled her purpose. The mountain had accepted her, and the valley's traps could no longer harm her people, for their memory was now restored and safe. Aaron stepped closer. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something beyond the power of any machine or technology. He realized that humans could bring hope where even magic or ancient power seemed lost. Lyra had trusted him, and together they had achieved what no one alone could have done. For a long moment, they stood in silence, looking at the view. The valley below was peaceful, as if the mountain had healed itself. Lyra touched Aaron's arm lightly, a silent thank you for his courage, his patience, and his unwavering trust. Then she turned to the plateau. She traced her hands across the carvings, closing her eyes. A soft breeze moved through the circle, lifting the edge of her hair and carrying her hum across the summit. Aaron felt the hum in his chest, calming him, filling him with the same quiet pride and joy that Lyra felt. The sun climbed higher, breaking fully through the clouds. Light filled every corner of the plateau, revealing the beauty and serenity of the mountain. Lyra looked around, her silver eyes sparkling. She had returned her people's memory to the world, and the mountain had welcomed her as one of its own. Aaron studied her, realizing how far she had come. From the moment he found her trapped in the valley, trembling and afraid, she had grown strong, brave, and wise. She had faced the traps, the vines, and the dangers of the mountain with determination. And through it all, she had trusted him completely. "Your journey is finished," he said softly. She smiled at him, her expression gentle and peaceful. But there was more to see. The plateau extended beyond the stone circle. Aaron and Lyra walked to the edge and looked down at the valley below. Streams glittered in the sunlight, trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the ruins where they had begun seemed smaller from this height. The world felt vast and alive, full of possibility. Lyra lifted the crystal once more, letting it glow softly. The light touched the valley, as if blessing it, connecting the past with the present. Aaron felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Together, they had not only survived, they had restored hope. She turned to him again, and for the first time, Aaron felt the full power of her gratitude. Her hand reached for his, and he held it firmly. They did not need words. Their shared experience had created a bond stronger than any language could express. As the sun reached its peak, Lyra placed the crystal back in the circle one last time. The glow faded gently, leaving only the memory of its light, a permanent mark of her people's presence on the mountain. Aaron looked at the horizon, thinking of the long journey ahead back to his ship, back to his world. But he knew that the mountain, the valley, and Lyra's people would always remain in his heart. He had been part of something greater than himself, and he had helped bring hope where there had once been fear. Lyra turned and gave him one final smile. Her eyes shone with joy, courage, and gratitude. The mountain, the valley, and her people's memory were safe, and she knew she had a friend she could trust forever. Together, they began the descent, stepping carefully down the mountain. Every step carried the story of their journey, the struggle, the trust, the courage, and the triumph. Aaron felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. He had found more than adventure. He had found purpose, friendship, and the power of hope. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with gold and crimson, Aaron and Lyra paused to look back at the summit. The stone circle glowed faintly in the last light, a quiet testament to what they had accomplished. Lyra's journey, once so full of fear and uncertainty, had become a story of trust, bravery, and freedom.